Good evening, folks. I'm going to be calling to order the regular bi-monthly meeting of the Marin Water Board of Directors for September 5th. Terry, could we get a roll call, please?
Yes, good evening. Vice President Ranjiv Kush.
Here.
Director Larry Russell.
Here.
Director Matt Sampson.
Here.
Director Jed Smith.
Here.
And President Monty Schmidt.
Here. Could I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Are there any comments on the agenda, Terry?
There are none.
Okay, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Vice President Kush.
Aye.
Director Russell.
Aye.
Director Sampson.
Aye.
Director Smith.
Aye.
President Schmidt.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any public comments on the closed session items only?
There are none.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, we will convene to closed session. Okay, good evening. We are reconvening from closed session at which ended at 6:32 with no reportable actions. Okay, moving forward. Do we have public comments on items not on the agenda?
Yes, we do. We have about 10 speakers. The first two I have is Mr. Phil Sauter and then Roger Roberts.
Good evening. Thank you to staff for the conservation workshop last Tuesday. It was a good format with a presentation followed by discussion for each of the 5 topics. For most of the topics, it turns out the presentation lasted. Can't hear you. Oh, I'm sorry.
There.
Oh.
There you go.
All right. Yeah, sorry about that. Just thank you to the staff for the conservation workshop last Tuesday. It was a great format, presentation followed by discussion for each of 5 topics. For most of the topics, it turned out that the presentation lasted for 20 minutes with about 5 or 10 minutes available for discussion. One suggestion would be in the future, allow more time for public feedback. One thing I learned was really surprising. Looking at the per capita daily usage numbers that the district sends to State Water Board every month, as well as results from the Flume study presented a couple months ago, I had understood that indoor water use was around 50 gallons per capita per day. But during a discussion with staff during one of the breaks, I learned that it's actually closer to 31 gallons per capita per day. And the numbers sent to the State Water Board are inflated by losses and other adjustments. I was surprised to hear that, and I asked again just to make sure, and the number came back 31 gallons per capita per day for indoor water use. That puts Marin Water customers among the most frugal indoor water users in the state. Given that our total daily use is around 90 to 100 gallons per capita, that means that somewhere around 1/3 of our treated water is used indoors and 2/3 is used outdoors for non-potable purposes. If that number holds, it was a real eye-opener for me and perhaps for some others as well. While Marin Water's mission statement is to provide a reliable supply of drinking water to our customers, the numbers suggest that we may really be in the outdoor irrigation business. So given that our customers are already doing a terrific job of conserving indoor water use, I'd like to suggest a follow-up workshop down the line to focus on just 2 of the 5 topics covered last week, landscapes and leaks. That will allow a much more robust exploration of programs to reduce the amount of potable water used outdoors. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Roger Roberts and then Mr. Julian Baralasa.
Good evening. You probably saw the front page news on the IJ today about the water board at the state level is going to put a lot of pressure on all of utilities, water utilities across the state to increase their conservation programs. Now, the interesting problem about that is that traditionally, the constraint of having to finance conservation programs through the operating budget has reduced the ability of agencies to really pursue this vigorously. I would like to propose that you think about and perhaps discuss with the water board getting a state-sponsored revolving line of credit for that purpose, which would then be refinanced with a takeout with bond financing once it has reached its limit. And I think that's a way to get around the problem that you've had over the years, in having a robust, well-financed program for water conservation. And I would like to throw that idea out there for you to chew on, and appreciate your listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you. After Julian Baralasa is Andrew Horton, and then Cole Younger.
Good evening. My name is Julian Baralasa, and I have worked at the district for 22 years. I am a water systems technician, which translates to leak detection person. Along with one other tech, we survey the entire district's infrastructure, such as valves, hydrants, meters, listening for leaks. Once we hear a potential leak sound, specialized equipment is utilized to pinpoint the approximate point of water loss. I enjoy my job because I help the district with detecting water loss, also with my interactions with the public. On many occasions, I identify consumer-side leaks, which are past the meter and the homeowner's responsibility. In these instances, I have notified many a surprised and mostly pleased consumer of their leak, some of which run into hundreds of gallons per day. Looking to the future, I would like to see the district as an attractive place to work, just like it was 22 years ago. We need to stay competitive with pay and benefits so we can retain and procure quality personnel. Thank you.
Andrew Horton, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Horton, and I've worked at Marin Water District for 14 years. I'm a distribution system operator supervisor, and our primary responsibility in our department is moving the water around the county from the treatment plants to all 130 tanks via 97 pumping stations using our computerized SCADA system. Our secondary responsibility is handling emergency leak calls. Our department works behind the scenes 24/7, around the clock, holidays, weekends, etc., to facilitate the repair of main breaks and the shutdown of customer services in the event of a water break on the customer's property. We also assist the public over the phone in addressing a myriad of water-related concerns, including pressure issues and water quality concerns, also including other hazards around the watershed. With the help of our knowledgeable staff, we also help the public in answering many general information questions and act more or less as a 24-hour call center to help forward them to the appropriate department to get any additional questions answered there. Our department is very busy. We receive thousands of calls each and every month from concerned citizens, and of those last month alone, we dispatched personnel to address over 200 of those complaints. Unfortunately, over the last year, we have seen an incredible turnover rate, and much of our staff is still in training. I've sadly seen several of our trainees leave MMWD recently in under 6 months, seeking better opportunities elsewhere. Without proper staffing, our department will not be able to respond promptly to the public, and the water will unnecessarily be wasted. If we cannot maintain properly trained and knowledgeable staff, the public will suffer and it will erode their confidence in us. It's my sincerest hope that the Water District will give us the support we need to hire and maintain our staff and provide the best possible service to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Cole Younger, and then Eric Etlinger.
Good evening. My name is Cole Younger, and I work as a construction inspector in the construction management group. I've been a full-time employee here at Marin Water for 9 years, but I worked 7 summers as a summer helper, seasonal employee before that. During COVID, I reported to work every day, despite the recommendations of the CDC. Putting myself and my family at risk, I worked with third-party contractors to make needed upgrades to our transmission system. Construction contracts and service upgrades did not end. Alongside my group and many other workers here at the district, we showed up to work ready every day. Committed to work, we do believe our jobs make a difference to the citizens of Marin County. In my years as a district employee, I've been fortunate enough to gain industry and institutional knowledge from experienced employees who have moved on. My fear is that the district continues to move forward without wage increases that keep up with inflation and the cutting of retiree benefits. A wealth of institutional knowledge will be lost. Marin Water will become a training ground for other jurisdictions. I, along with my colleagues, take pride in our work and what Marin Water stands for. But we feel that the district is more concerned with their public appearance rather than the need to acknowledge and support the work performed by its employees that bolster the image of the district. Thank you.
Good evening. For those of you who haven't met me, my name's Eric Etlinger. I'm the Water District's aquatic ecologist. Our small fisheries department has 2 full-time staff. We're both biologists. We're responsible for managing and monitoring the federally listed coho salmon, steelhead, and freshwater shrimp across maybe 18 miles of streams. Throughout California, salmon populations have been declining, but the salmon of Lagunitas Creek have remained stable. And in fact, just recently, a record number of juvenile salmon left Lagunitas Creek for the ocean. As part of our job, we routinely use sophisticated technology, electrofishers, passive integrated transponder antennas, rotary screw traps, water quality sensors, surgical tools, and all sorts of computer hardware and software. We manage millions of dollars in grant funding for stream restoration projects. We provide technical expertise on advisory groups and participate in work groups addressing topics ranging from local community issues to federal endangered species policy. When there's a pipe break and chlorinated water spills into local streams, we're responsible for assessing the impacts to aquatic life. We also engage the public in our work through various media outlets and volunteer events. Our colleagues at other water districts have expressed surprise that we do so much with so few staff. And what I've said to them is, we're a very efficient department working in a very efficient water district. So, as you know, MMWD employees and management are engaged in a union contract negotiation. Our union bargaining team has the full support of MMWD employees. And in my opinion, what we're asking for is fair and reasonable. Very few staff are asking for raises. Actually, what we're asking for is for salaries to catch up to inflation and to keep up with it. In one of the most expensive places to live in the country, that doesn't seem like very much to ask for. Thank you.
Jason Gooding and Phil Johnson.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jason Gooding. I've worked at the Water District for 6 years, and I'm a heavy equipment operator on the service crews. Today, I stand before you not just as a representative of the Marin Municipal Water District, but as a voice for my coworkers, the dedicated men and women who work tirelessly to ensure that our community has access to clean and reliable water 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We all know that water is life. It's not just a cliche, it's a fundamental truth. Our mission is clear: to deliver this precious resource to every home, every business, and every corner of our district without fail. But behind the scenes, there are unsung heroes who make this mission possible. These are the employees of our water district: the chemists, watershed rangers, electricians, maintenance workers, emergency response crews, so many more. They are the backbone of our organization, and they deserve not just our appreciation, but also our support. Our request today is simple yet crucial. We ask for your support in providing competitive cost of living adjustments to our employees. Why? Because These are the dedicated individuals who, at any hour of the day or night, respond to water main breaks and service emergencies that threaten our water supply. They sacrifice their sleep, family time, personal lives to ensure that our community never goes without water. We love what we do and we're passionate about our work. However, it's essential to acknowledge the realities we face. We are short-staffed and our compensation falls below the average in comparable water districts. The relentless march of inflation has only added to our financial challenges. Please take note that about 80% of Marin Water workers commute from outside the service area, travel long distances and during hours of daily commuting just to ensure that our community never goes without water. It's a testament to their dedication, but it's also a clear indicator that we are struggling to afford to live where we work. There's another aspect of our benefits package that deserves special attention, our retiree medical benefits. While some may argue for minimizing these benefits, they are in fact a powerful and attractive feature that helps us not just recruit new talent, but retain the expertise we've cultivated. In this competitive job market where talent is constantly sought after, our retiree medical benefits set us apart. They communicate that we're not just a training ground for employees to build their skills and then to move on to other companies. We're an organization that invests in its people, and not just for the present, but for the long term. In closing, I urge each of you to consider the profound impact of our retiree medical benefits. They are not just a line item in our budget, they are a strategic investment in the past, present, and future of our water district. Please stand together with us to ensure the future of our water district, and in doing so, ensure the future of clean, reliable water for all. Thank you for your time.
Bill,
Hi, Bill Johnson. I am the senior park ranger for the water district, and I've been with the water district for 30 plus years. I just want to tell you a little about what we do. We are kind of the public safety department for the water district. We are a 24/7 operation, 365 days a year. We encounter over 2 million people a year who come to the watershed to recreate and enjoy themselves. The park rangers are responsible for the law enforcement, responsible for wildland firefighting. We're all EMTs, so we do emergency medical technician work. We do search and rescue and a host of other things. But we just want to let you know, and the union here, we're the face of the water district. You know, we're the people that contact the people on the watershed or customer service or knocking on a door regarding a broken main. And you want these people are hard workers. They're exceptional and they should be compensated that way. We don't want below average wages and we don't want below average people working here. We want top quality people. And we need to keep the people we have, and we don't want to become a training ground for other agencies. So we're just asking for what's fair. It was mentioned earlier, nobody here is seeking to get a big raise or be paid top dollar. We just want equal pay, and we want to be on par with other agencies to maintain our standards and so that we can continue to serve and do the work that we do. Thank you.
thank you. Next are Mike Kyle and Mariette Shin.
Hi guys, my name is Michael Kyle. I'm a drinking water treatment plant operator. I've been with the district for 14 years and I really hate public speaking. So this kind of got dropped on my plate. The reason why I'm here today is we are a 24/7, 365 department, meaning that on the Hill, Christmas, New Year's, every day of the year, you have people on the Hill working in those seats 24 hours a day. And in order to train those people, it takes about a year to a year and a half. So being able to retain good quality employees is a benefit to the district. In my time here, we've been flush with employees, we've been low on employees. And it seems that we're always going to low periods where it's causing great amounts of overtime and further hardship on us personally, right? Having to come in on your days off and work 12-hour shifts. And that is something that is difficult. So I guess in point is to be able to not become a training ground and to be able to retain high quality employees. That's it.
Hi, I'm Marriott Shin. I'm an information systems analyst, GIS specialist. I've been at the district for 22 and a half years. Thank you for your time. We frontline workers, as you've heard all these people speak, are here today because we care about the continued success of and health of the water district. As a 24/7 operation with many dedicated and experienced workers, we have been able to keep the water running and rapidly address customer emergencies with skill and excellent customer service. We want to be able to offer the same high quality services into the future. And with the very large and significant projects that the district must complete in the next 10 plus years, more than ever, we will need to recruit and retain knowledgeable staff to get the work done to the high standards that our customers have come to expect from us. However, with the district's gutting of retiree health benefits for future employees and allowing staff wages to fall further and further below average, we will recruit and retain fewer and fewer competent new hires and just become a training ground, as my fellow colleagues have mentioned, for young professionals who just want to get their foot in the door and then leave for other more competitive agencies. We will lose employees who care about the long-term success of the water district. Over the last 3 years, about 38% of our workforce has left MMWD. Of those, about 20% left for jobs at competing agencies, and this loss will only intensify in the coming years without competitive wages and benefits. 80% of our frontline workers, as was already mentioned, are commuting from outside of our service area into work here. These dedicated staff overcome great challenges every day just to get to work. And then they give everything they have to provide all of the physical labor, planning, administration, analysis, reporting, tracking, surveying, repairs, protection and safety, and customer service and support to hold up the district. It sometimes feels like Atlas holding up the world. So please do not marginalize our staff to the bottom of the curve. Our frontline workforce of 170 members have overwhelmingly voted to authorize a strike if necessary, to preserve the quality of staff and services, which are just too important to us to lose. Thank you.
Thank you. President Schmidt, we have 2 more online who would like to provide comment. The first one is Clayton Smith and then Marilyn Price. Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Yes, given the recent and ongoing plague of so-called wildfires, many of which appear to be caused by teams of arsons, forest safety is looming as a top concern for communities who find themselves in the natural interface zones. Many parts of residential Marin are actually embedded in the forests that abut all the public land we are surrounded by, right in the middle of the danger zones. 2 things that stand starkly out from the experience of Lahaina is the lack of notification, both by siren and by emergency text messaging. The second is the egregiously poor management of population evacuation. I think that under the circumstances and the significant amount of proximate land under your management responsibility, you would set up an ongoing interagency committee with the other forest landowners, state, county, and federal, explicitly to address these 2 concerns: emergency notification and effective evacuation services. Also, we have warning signs about mountain lions and feeding coyotes, but few that I remember relating directly to fire consciousness for visitors to the parks. I think that would be helpful. The terrifying events that we're watching globally on the television should not be ignored. These fires seem to, as I pointed out in an earlier commentary, given the amount of aluminum products being aerosoled in the air above the county's forest lands, may be a contributing factor to the ferocity of these fires. And that should not be discounted. And that's why this emergency service of notification and evacuation is, I think, becoming a very top priority for all the people who have land management, such as yourselves, as part of their responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Marilyn Price, please.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to say how pleased I am to live in Marin and feel so comfortable drinking the water and using the water in our district, and to all your employees. And so nice to see so many of them attending this meeting. I also want to thank you for the workshop, the watershed workshop, which I attended, and was so pleased to see that you all took notes of our suggestions and, listened to us as well as we learning from you. A lot of my focus is always on educating. Actually, I taught an environmental class in 1976 in my home, and that was coming out of the drought. And I remember then telling the people that attended, how important it was, even though the drought was over, that we still continue to conserve water. And I related it to energy. And I just feel, using that in your education, using that example in your education might convince more people why they need to conserve throughout the year and always. I even thought of having like maybe a city challenge, like they did, and put out those kiddo signs, but that we challenge every city to see how much they can conserve and have the kiddo signs out, on their street corners, and let people know how they compare with the other cities. At any rate, that's mostly what I wanted to share tonight. And thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you, Ms. Price. There are no further speakers.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Okay, with that, we come to directors and general managers announcements. I'll start off to the right here. Matt, do you want to?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Two quick announcements. The first one, Friday, the 29th of September at 8:30 in the morning is going to be the 8th annual State of the Tomales Bay Conference at the Inverness Yacht Club. Tickets are available now on their website, and it should be a good day-long update on everything going on in Tomales Bay and the watershed surrounding it, which I'm looking forward to attending. The second is last month, the One TAM group put out their Marin Regional Forest Health Strategy paper. And in there, one, I'm excited because it's a regional approach to looking at the forest health from specifically a fire perspective on a lot of aspects. But there are projects identified in there on our watershed for wildfire reduction potential. And it's good to see. So I'm hoping at the next watershed committee meeting, we can get a little bit more update on those projects, specifically in the One TAM report, how we're doing with timing and prioritization of those, and then also how those are going to be interfacing with the surrounding agencies' projects, so we make sure we're doing this all together as a county.
Thank you. Ranjit?
No real report. I just wanted to make a comment. I believe at a previous meeting, there was the grand jury report. The responses to the grand jury report were discussed. I think we approved those in the consent calendar today. And I just wanted to note, after reading those responses, I thought they were really good. I thought they were really balanced. So kudos to staff for putting those together. Thank you.
Thank you. Jed?
Okay, first, I'll report out on the Communications and Water Efficiency Committee meeting of August 16th. where the staff provided an update on our current and upcoming water efficiency programs and communication activities. We brought in a consultant from FM3 that provided the results from our survey. That was implemented in the end of July. So thank you, Adrian and FM3 for showing us those results. And the survey was meant to help us inform and develop a message that would be reaching out to our customers for future water efficiency programs and outreach campaigns. Staff will be further analyzing the survey findings and then using that along with market segmentation data and other community engagement input to begin campaign development work. The public may view the presentation on our website and watch the meeting recording if you desire on the district's website. That was on August 16th at marinwater.org/calendar. But really, thank you, Adrian, for driving that process. I thought the FM3 was excellent and efficient and turned it around quickly. Two more reports. One is I was able to go to a meeting of several, I think, of our strongest, most thoughtful environmentalists in Marin with Jared Huffman and Senator Martin Heinrich in Sausalito a couple of days ago. And I just can't say enough about how lucky we are to have Jared Huffman by our side. One of the leading, if not the leading environmentalist in our country. And he's looking out not just for climate around the world, but here in Marin and specifically at Marin Water, helping us get access to water funds with the Army Corps of Engineers and some of the Infrastructure Act. We have an advocate on our side and we're fortunate to be able to be working with him. Lastly, I spoke at the Rotary Club this morning. We had about 60 or 70 people from Mill Valley Rotary Club wanting an update on everything to do with our water efficiency programs, with our new rate strategy, and it was an engaging, thoughtful group of doers. And so thank you, Adrian, for your support there. And that's all for me.
Larry?
Nothing.
Okay. I'd like to report. Last weekend I attended weekend before last I attended a COHO conference that's put on every year that up in Northern California that recognizes all the sort of the leading and cutting edge efforts that are going on in the state to balance water management, in-stream flows that provide habitat for fish, but also water supply for rural communities. And I think that the real two parts to that. First of all, is that the district is always recognized as a preeminent leader in efforts to restore coho salmon, which are listed salmonid, of which some of the strongest populations in the North Coast are in our Lagunitas watershed. The other part of it is the connection between the health of our rivers and the health of our water supply. When we look at wildfire impacts to streams from a fishery standpoint, wildfires have water quality problems, high sediment load, but those are also issues for our water supply. So I just want to note that, again, the district is always recognized as a leader in this field, but also the important connection between the health of our watershed and our water supply. And to thank Eric Ellinger, who spoke earlier, of just how much our staff really does do, and what a credit it is to the institution that we are leaders in this area. In addition to being water providers, we are also fire managers and with our fellow land management agencies. We are also addressing public safety issues. We are providing, of course, safe and reliable water supplies for our customers. So the district does a lot, and our staff really do make that happen. So much appreciation to them.
Finance Administration.
Go ahead.
I was not at the Finance and Administration Committee meeting, but I did see it online, and I am chair of the committee, and there is a report. So I can report out that the committee met on August 24th. The staff provided monthly financial updates and quarterly investment updates, reviewed our investment policy, our rate review, reserve policy, and debt management. And the presentations can be seen online at our website as well. So I was able to meet with Brett ahead of time and afterwards, and we have an outstanding group behind us in this team.
Thank you. Okay, Ben.
Couple quick items. as part of a North Bay group that was individually selected by FEMA. Adrian Mertens had the opportunity to go to Maui to provide support on their post-fire activities, presumably largely focused on the public outreach and comms piece that she spent a good couple years in Santa Rosa doing. So all the costs for the trip will be reimbursed by FEMA, and just a great opportunity to share your knowledge. And I'm sure that they were very interested, as I heard, and appreciated that. So thank you for doing that. I also wanted to share with the board that later this month, a few of us are going to Washington, D.C. In meetings that our federal lobbyist has set up to support our WRDA grant. Director Smith, our WAC chair, is going to be joining a couple of staff folks, and we'll report out when we get back. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Adrian, for making the time to travel to Maui and provide support and knowledge from our experience with fire as well. Okay, with that, we're moving on to our regular items. Item number 6, update on enterprise resource program replacement and automated metering infrastructure projects. This is an information item.
We do still have the consent calendar.
Oh,
if you
oops, I'm so
consider
sorry.
Or interested
Jumped
in.
right over that. We got so excited here. Okay, I guess we need a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
And do we have any public comments on the consent calendar?
There are none.
Okay, could we get a roll call vote, please, Terry?
Yes. Vice President Kush,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Sampson,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
and President Schmidt.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, and then with that, we'll move on to item number 6.
Okay, good evening, directors. Crystal Yesman, Chief Engineer. Before I get started tonight, I just have a couple of people to introduce. Second to my right here is Brad Taylor. Brad is our new IT manager. He just started work on Monday of last week. And he comes to us from the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, where he was the leader of technical operations group, and he set IT strategy and managed teams from data center operations, network operations, enterprise applications and cloud operations, field services, and the IT customer service center. He has worked as an IT manager for over 30 years across a broad range of industries, including legal, biotech, financial services, technology, engineering, publishing, entertainment, and IT consulting. He's born and raised in the SF Bay Area, and he likes to spend time enjoying the outdoors with his family and his 100-pound yellow Labrador named Luna. So welcome, Brad. And so with that, we'll go on to this item, which is that we are about to launch a major information technology project to replace our enterprise resource planning program, SAP, which is currently at end of life. And so in order to review the planning and processes and risks associated with that project, we've consulted with Andy Levine here to my right, directly to my right, to give us an independent review of that project's planning, but also as it would coordinate with the implementation of system-wide automated metering infrastructure. So we're going to present the results of that technical review, but just a few items about Andy. Andy has 30-something years of experience in the IT technology realm in water utility. He was the IT director at East Bay Municipal Utilities District. He's a local Marin resident, so he's very engaged in our board and the decisions that are made here. And so we're happy to have him tonight to give us his review of this upcoming project. So Andy, we'll go ahead and get your PowerPoint going.
I might.
You might. So it's this one here. Yeah.
It's in the shared. Just go to share.
You also have to share that screen. There you go. Yep. And then from begins. And then if you push the pad on your microphone, so this red light will light up. There you go.
Great.
Oh, wait.
Looks like we're seeing the not the presenter. There we go. Okay, it's all good.
Okay, good.
It's always something with technology. Okay. Good evening, Director Schmidt and President Schmidt and the directors. Happy to be here to do what I can to talk to you about your ERP and AMI projects coming up. So first of all, we'll just talk a little bit about those projects and what they are and how they will help the district, and talk about the risks and challenges of doing large technology projects like that. And then in the end, I recommend an approach for how you might try to deal with these two large critical projects for the district. So first, let's talk about the ERP project. Sorry if you can't hear me, there we go. Enterprise resource planning basically is the brains of the district. All the systems that you're using that handle accounting or your asset management, your customer billing, your HR, all those systems are in one program that you've been using for 23 years by SAP. But ERP is a class of software. SAP is just one company who makes this. Not only is the software itself very complicated, but it also ties into lots of other pieces of software that are very important for the district to use. For example, your GIS system and mapping. Well, where's it getting all that information? It's getting it from your ERP software. So 23 years is a long time to be using a piece of software. And SAP, the versions that we're currently using here at the district, are end of life. So SAP has essentially said they're no longer going to support this software, and other than emergency security patches, that's the only support that you'll get from that through December 2027. So what does that mean? That means that if there are regulatory changes, you won't get those updates. If a bug is found, it will not be fixed. If you have a feature that you'd like to use that you didn't previously use, or something new that you might want to do, you won't be able to do that. So clearly it's important that this system be replaced. And just to go over, as I mentioned earlier, what SAP does and what ERP is, you can see in here all these different groups that are critical to the operation of the district, and many complex business processes inside each area. So it's very important to the district. This is not a system that you want to have unsupported or to have security patch problems with or anything like that. And just about all employees touch these systems. It really is the brains of the district. And just so you know what it actually looks like behind the scenes, there's 28 servers that are running this, that your IT staff has to maintain. They have to patch, they have to replace that hardware when it gets old. They're on each one of these machines, they have to do performance analysis and do upgrades and patches. It's very, very time consuming, and it's a complex system. A new system would likely be in the cloud, and they wouldn't have responsibility for all of that. So the current plan is it's a $10 million project that's been funded through the CIP, and you can see that the dollar amounts there. In the first year, what would happen is the project would be initiated, and really we have some work we need to do before we can even do it. We can't just call SAP or another vendor right now and say replace it. It's incredibly complex. We have to look at all the business processes and see what are things we can do to improve those processes. We have to look at what manual things are we doing now that should be in the ERP. So this was the software that we put in 23 years ago. The needs are different now. So we have to understand those needs. We would need to form a steering committee with the department heads, and all the departments are impacted. We would need a project manager and a technical lead and a functional lead to get this going. All that would happen in that first year, at which point we could then know what we actually need and create an RFP and start looking at vendors and deciding what our next steps would be. And then in the following year, we would expect to evaluate and choose a vendor and begin to move forward to give them a contract. In third year, we'd really be doing the implementation, excuse me, migrating all the data over, because all of that's very important, and also making sure that the system is customized or really configured to meet the district's needs. We would want to keep any customizations to a minimum so that it's easier to be supported by our vendor. And then we would cut over, and in the fourth and fifth year, you would likely add some new functionality and things that maybe we didn't do right up front, because it's going to be such a giant change for the district. We don't want people to be overwhelmed by that. So that's the basic kind of background on the ERP project. On the AMI project.
Sorry, Andy, will you take questions now? Can we interrupt?
Sure.
I just wanted to ask about security. My impression is that moving to the cloud is generally more secure for both operations and storage, because you have fewer large vendors managing versus every entity doing it independently on their own, like MMWD. Is that correct, or are there any security issues related to this transition?
Well, there's a couple questions there. There are always security issues related to any IT system. I mean, that's one of the most critical issues around them. But in general, yes, if you're going with a large, established company that is operating in the cloud, they know that they're a target, and they know that that's the heart of their business, and they do a generally very good job of managing that. Generally better than we would by having our own systems, just because they have the appropriate expertise and they get the benefit of scale. They can have a security operations center that is manned 24 hours a day with dozens of people who are all they're doing is looking for these types of problems.
Right. So I guess I'm getting at, this is another reason that we should be making this transition now.
Certainly. I mean, a system that was designed 23 years ago, or was implemented 23 years ago, probably designed before that, the security landscape is totally different than it was back then.
Yeah, just following on. So our SAP support expires 2027. Your timeline has 4 to 5 years on phase 4. So we're in a sprint mode right now, right?
Yes, we will get to this in a moment,
Okay.
but yes, it's very important that
Yeah.
this project happen quickly.
And the $10 million estimate that was in our approved budget, or is that a new figure?
I think
Yeah, the total cost would be around 10 million, but the board approved a 2-year CIP
Got it.
program.
For
So
a 2-year budget. Yeah.
the next 2-year budget will
Yeah.
come later.
Thanks.
And that's also just an estimate. We have to see what happens when we get the bids. Okay, so to the advanced metering infrastructure. So this system essentially provides customers with better feedback on their water use, and it provides the district with better feedback on leaks and those types of things going on in the water system. And there's we know that with better leak detection, we will find some leaks and we will save some water there. And there's also potential for long-term cost savings if with an automated system versus manual reads. This project is essentially to expand the existing 5,000 accounts out to the full 55,000 district customers. So just like with our SAP, we have our marketing graph of AMI. And this is just so we all understand what the components of AMI when we talk about it. It's a very complex system. And one of the reasons I jokingly called that a marketing diagram, because in our the district has done some deep looking into doing AMI, and the district's AMI system diagram looks something like this, right? It's an incredibly complex system because you have so many different business units, and it's an eye chart. I understand. It's just to get you to feel the complexity of the project, but
you're going from essentially the whole meter to cash process. You've got your meter reading, you got your maintenance management of meters and responding to leaks, and all the systems that do all that are involved. So it's a very complex project. The estimates on the AMI implementation, $25 million, what was estimated by the latest readiness study. And that study, there's a feasibility study that's been completed and a plan and roadmap that looks very complete. Those are basically describe what the district needs to do. So the next step would be to initiate that project. So similarly to any technical project, but the ERP project that we mentioned earlier, we need to assemble a leadership team, a steering committee, a project management team, technical and functional leads. Then we need to develop an RFP, make sure that we're going to get what we want, conduct proposals and demonstrations, go through the whole procurement process, and then award that contract. In the third phase, the second year, we would work on the back end stuff. So what does that mean? It's everything but the meters, right? It's your collector network, your systems to manage and process all those 55,000 meters. You have to implement a meter data management system. Very important to realize right now, for your average customer, you've got 6 reads a year. It's pretty easy. If you're going to be having, are you going to have 5-minute reads, 1-hour reads? What are you going to keep? You'll have thousands upon thousands of reads per customer. Much more significant meter data management system required. And then have to integrate that system with the billing system and those other systems and train everybody up on it. After you've completed that and you've tested it and everybody knows how to use them, now you start to roll out the meters, and you have to install those meters as well as develop a customer-facing portal so that customers can interact with their own data and get useful information out of it. And then in the future, you maybe in the 5th year, you could talk about doing more with your AMI if that were something you wanted to do. So we've talked about 2 projects, and I showed you that they're complicated. So what are the risks of technology projects like these? Well, the district hasn't done projects of this scale that are IT or technology based since they put SAP in 20 years ago. These are huge projects. Again, I would call the ERP, it's brain surgery on your operation. And both in the AMI project and the ERP project, business is continuing. So when you're replacing the accounting system, you still have to be paying your vendors. You still have to be processing your payroll. You still have work orders coming in every day. You've got your, meter reads coming in every day, bills and payments every day. All of that has to go on while you're replacing the system, essentially in parallel, to do a bright cutover. That's very difficult. These projects like this are hard to do successfully. So if you look out in the world, you will see countless stories of water districts who struggled when they replaced their billing system, or anybody who replaced their ERP. Marin, when they replaced their SAP, I forget, what was that, a decade ago or something? It was all over the newspapers, right? It was a disaster. And it's not SAP, well, it might be SAP's fault, but there are successful installs of SAP and there are unsuccessful installs of SAP. Why does that happen? Well, we have to take a look at how do you make sure that your projects succeed. So you can see here, I just was citing a statistic that, 2/3 of ERP implementations fail in some method. That's going to be, maybe it's their cost overruns, maybe they're late, maybe they don't do everything that they could, but we don't want that to happen, right? So we need to be very careful about it. And the same thing happens with AMI projects. Many AMI systems have been put in and then less than a decade later, they're replaced. Why is that happening? You know, we have to understand these projects are risky. So these are kind of what I think are the kind of 7 areas of risk that we have to be aware of in large projects like this. So there's the scope. What are we doing? What's in and what's out? And in general, in these projects, if you don't think about it enough up front, there's going to be more stuff in. You're going to start adding things. That adds complexity, that adds cost, that adds resource need, the functionality. These are incredibly complicated systems. It's really hard when you're looking at the presentation or reading a 500-page response to the RFP. Is this going to work for the way that you close your books at the end of every accounting period? It doesn't match with what you expect. Are the customers, when they see their new billing pages, going to be happy about that? Is it going to do what they expect? Functionality, if you're not specific, may or may not match what you hope it is. The technology, maybe you roll it out and it goes slowly and everybody hates using it. Maybe when you implement it, you realize, whoops, it's not compatible with this other system it needs to talk to. Project management. What happens if your project manager is not keeping an eye on all of the milestones and the costs, and you find yourself, the schedule says 90% complete, the budget says 90% complete, but you're only halfway there. Those are project management issues. Resources, as I mentioned, you are doing this while people are doing their daily work. When you're doing your AMI project and the folks who are, are already out there fixing meters or dealing with bad reads or processing read exceptions, well, they're going to do that and the AMI stuff at the same time. What if they're not available when the project manager is asking, hey, this is supposed to be done by this day? And they're saying, I can't do that. I've got all these bad reads I have to go through and customers aren't getting billed. Your vendor, maybe you get the vendor's A team, maybe you don't, or these things tend to, the vendor gets bought. You never know what's going to happen. And then this one, change management, is about this. Both of these systems are going to be used by large numbers of district staff and your customers. What if they don't like it? What if they don't accept the change? Too many clicks. I used to be able to pay my bill faster. I can't find this. I can't find that. The old joke that I always say is, I got into doing IT stuff because I don't like people. But the reality is this change management and the people are what makes the project successful. I've seen technically superior projects fail because people don't like them. And I've seen really bad projects succeed because everybody is happy about it. And that's a change management risk that you must be paying attention to as you roll out these complex projects. And complexity makes it worse, right? So these are true of all projects, but as it gets complex, you saw those diagrams. Most employees are going to be impacted. Everybody's got timesheets. Everybody has to deal with procurement. Everybody has, many people are doing work orders and things like that. Your customers are going to be seeing these systems through their bills and their statements and their payments. So a lot of employees are actually going to be not only involved in their day-to-day work, but both projects. And as I mentioned, you got to keep those systems alive the whole time. So that's a real issue. So I showed you this diagram before that shows the major functions of SAP. So these ones that I circled with the little red, well, those are majorly impacted by the AMI project. So someone who works on the information system, the billing system, if we're doing all these projects at the same time, they are looking at daily reads they're processing, all the things they do related to that, and dealing with the customers. They're trying to talk to the team on the replacement project to say, it'd be nice if it did this better or that better, and here's how we do this and here's how we do that. And then has to also be talking to the AMI team about, and here's what the AMI needs to provide for us. If we look at the AMI project, these areas overlap with the ERP project. So anybody who's doing these things is also needing to be active on the other project. So we're splitting people in three. And that's not good when we just talked about all the risks that projects like this have. So I'm suggesting that the right way to handle this is with a risk-based project approach. So we have two projects and they're discrete, but there's huge overlap. And if we do them simultaneously, we're just increasing the risk of failure in two projects that are already very risky. So one way to solve that would be to do them in series instead of parallel, defer one of the projects. But we don't want to do that. These are important projects to the district. We need to look at what does that mean? So if we were to do a phased implementation, what happens? What are the impacts? So if we delay AMI, you're deferring the project benefits. So your customers are not going to have the ability to have that real-time look at their consumption. The district is going to not be able to get the potential water savings from improved leak detection, things like that. One potential advantage of delaying AMI is, although it's becoming more mature, those systems get better every year. So if you do defer it, you're likely to get a better system in the future than you would today. And if you ask anyone who put a system in 10 years ago, they would tell you that because they've got their system and it's got its issues.
Well, then you'd never do anything.
That's correct.
Sorry.
Sorry. Then you'd never do anything if that's your thought on IT upgrades.
No, of course but one important thing, and let's say a difference, because we can talk about deferring ERP, is ERP is very mature. The difference between ERP 5 years ago, today, and 5 years from now is not that large. And again, I said it's potential. I'm not saying you're going to get a better AMI in 5 years, but you might. One example is like in the district's evaluation of AMI, they're evaluating, or the readiness plan looked at implementing our own managed collectors to get data from the AMI radios, but also looked at cellular collectors. 10 years ago, you couldn't get cellular collectors. That's real nice, have somebody else manage your collection system. So so you don't know what's going to happen. Similarly with battery technology, one of the biggest issues around water AMI, thing you don't see on like electric, they've got power. They can have high powered radios, no problem. In water, it's all about the batteries. And we know from our phones and our watches that every year the batteries get better. Now, if we were to delay ERP, and we could do AMI first or do them simultaneously, but if we were to delay ERP, what happens? Well, as we mentioned and Director Smith noted, if it's going to take some years to replace it, you're going to be flying without a net. And a failure in the ERP system is a critical business failure. If you can't send out your water bills, you can have revenue problems. If you're not sending out your paychecks, your employees will be less happy. There's a lot of issues around these systems. They're not sexy, but they're incredibly important to the operation of the district, and their failure is noticed far and wide and immediately when it does happen. There are some benefits we would expect if we put that we wouldn't be able to get. We think some of these manual processes that we can automate, we wouldn't be able to do that. And new functionality that a number of work groups have requested, we would be deferring that. A second thing is if we do the AMI first, well, first we'll have to get the AMI to work with our existing system. And then when we put in the ERP system, we'll have to reintegrate everything and change the customer facing things all over again. So I see there's lots of disadvantages and no advantages. So yeah, you can tell from that really looking at this from a risk management standpoint, that the legacy ERP system is a current serious risk to the district's operation. And I think deferring that is unacceptable. I think doing it simultaneously with the AMI is very risky. And I think that deferring AMI is a better alternative because there's not a lot of risk there. You're just delaying some benefits. So my recommendation, having reviewed this, is that I believe you should start the ERP project immediately. So you can try to get off of that system before the support becomes even less acceptable and there are no fixes and nobody there to bail you out. And as soon as that stabilizes and employees and customers are comfortable on the new system, you initiate the AMI project and then you can move forward with that. So if you were to do that, what would the next steps be? Well, you jump in with both feet to the ERP, you start your steering committee, you get a consultant to help out and drive that to make sure, because it's a huge job, and go through that RFP process, make sure you got yourself a solid vendor and that you have a very clear idea of what you expect them to do. Because as I said earlier, there's all these systems have been successfully installed and all these systems have been total disasters. It's not the software, it's the process. So very important that we do that carefully. So this is kind of just the beginning of the roadmap for what I think needs to happen next. And that's what I have to say today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'll take board questions. Go to the left here first, maybe.
Sure. Well, it's interesting. I don't see it the way you see it. The benefits of AMI to me are substantial, having had AMI for at least 5 years. It's the only tool that really works for giving the consumer real-time information of water. The Flume does some pieces of it. And I live in a world, I run 2 consulting firms. I live in a world of ain't broke, don't fix. Now, you indicate there's substantial risk, in your opinion, with the current ERP. I don't feel that risk. Maybe I'm ignorant. It looks to me like a Microsoft envisioned system of once you're in, can't get out. And the ERP just puts you in the squirrel cage and you go round and round and round and round and round and round. Even the idea of moving to the cloud, what's the monthly fee for that? I'm sure it's in the 6 figures, if not more. And we basically take a piece of hardware that we change to somebody else's hardware and pay them to have the hardware. And we lose control of that. It's gone. It's out there somewhere. So I haven't really understood the need. I've been on the board for 19 years. I wasn't here when they first put in the system. I was here when we approached the county to help them with their system and they turned us down. I think I understand it fairly well. I have a PhD in engineering and been around. My thesis was a computer program. I have a pretty good feel for that. And we're always under this pressure as technicians and as managers to replace the hardware, replace the software. I intentionally still run Word 2010 because I can buy it and own it. It works flawlessly with other, right to today's Word. No one has complained. And I understand the concept of it's time for a change. I don't understand the risk. If bugs haven't been found in 23 years, I have a little trouble believing you're going to have a bug. Maybe I'm ignorant, but it just seems to me, I just don't have that feel in my heart of that, this is a pending collapse. 18 servers, that one I can relate to. That seems a little more complicated. But a server is just a computer and it's stacked. So it's not like something that's just waiting to die. It could. But again, you know, the mean time between failures on equipment like that, if it doesn't fail in the first 5 years, it's probably pretty safe to keep running. At least that's been my experience with those kind of machines. So anyway, those are my reactions. I do appreciate your thoughts and your efforts and your experience. I just have never, as I said, felt this burning need to replace the ERP. I mean, what happens if you don't replace it? You know, it's running. It may not be the slickest, it may not be the best, but it's like an old car versus a new car. Yeah. There's lots of bells and whistles that you didn't have that you don't use. So, you know, those are just my reactions to the concept.
I understand. And I think a lot of people do replace systems because they want the bright, shiny new one. And I'll tell you that I don't think you should replace them for the bright, shiny new one. It's the water district. We don't need to have the fanciest systems. We need to have effective systems that work. But there's a difference, and that's why it's been in place for 23 years. But the vendors no longer going to support that. So that means that if next year there's a change in employment law about the way taxes need to be reported and calculated, in the past, SAP would give us a tax update.
Yeah, but we don't use SAP now. We use an outside vendor for that purpose.
Well, yes, but the outside vendor that you're using, Rimini Street, I believe, is it right? They're doing that same thing, but they're shimming it into the SAP system. It's the SAP system that's still doing it, and they're essentially like plugging an IV into the dinosaur to do that, right? And the more and more you do that, the larger the chances are that they cannot do what you're asking to do. And you're right that the district doesn't collapse when that happens, but something goes manual and somebody builds, you know, a Winchester Mystery House additional room to solve that problem. And yeah, there are systems running. I was buying a car and they were checking the lease and I saw a mainframe green screen come up there. And Ford was using a mainframe to do that. And I've seen the same thing at Safeway. And yes, you can keep those things alive for a very long time, but especially circling back to the security issue, you're getting to the point where then this system becomes a ship in a bottle. You can't connect it to anything because you cannot maintain its security. And then you can't get those work orders onto maps. Or if you want to, somebody's going to do it sneaker net style, the old days. I mean, very quickly you get yourself to an untenable situation. So the concern is to try to solve that before it happens. But using again, your car analogy, you know, if you have a Model T now, you're having trouble getting parts, you're having trouble getting gas that will work in it. And it's not legal to go on the street anyway, things like that. So I don't think this is being replaced out of vanity or any sort of, we really want sexy new things. SAP is saying, if you come to us, we will not help you. And that hardware that we're managing, those 28 servers, when we call Microsoft because we're having a problem and they'll say, well, you need to be on Windows 2026. We can't be on Windows 2026 because our ancient version of SAP won't do it. So they're not problems that can't be solved, but it will become, it's more and more overhead and duct tape and baling wire to keep it together. And the cloud versus non-cloud, totally separate issue. We could do an on-premise solution. If for some reason you didn't want to do cloud-based solutions, I would suggest that a cloud-based solution is the way to go, especially for a district the size of Marin, who I think, struggles to have enough staff to be experts at all those things, whereas a vendor is more likely to be able to do that. But you can absolutely do it as long as they're still offering it. When we tried to replace our finance system, went out to bids at East Bay Mud, maybe it was 4 or 5 years ago. I think we had a dozen or so bidders, and we said on-premise or cloud, do what you want. We had 2 vendors who said, we'll do it on-premise if you want. Everybody else was just like, they don't even do it that way. And they won't going forward. I mean, to run major systems like this on your own business is disappearing as an option even. But there are plenty of reasons folks are more comfortable with it. But it's kind of separate from this. The risk of the current system, it has nothing to do with cloud. It's just, it's obsolete.
But we have the option, for instance, of sending out a payroll. I mean, I assume we're still doing what we did. We're printing the bills outside. That's what we've done for years, as far as I know.
But
No, I believe we print the bills here. Yes, we do. The mail clerk is every week taking a stack of bills to the post office to be mailed out.
And payroll is actually a great example of why this system is so archaic and a dinosaur. It needs to be replaced. I mean, the system went down a few months ago. We didn't have support from SAP. We had to go to outside consultants to help bring us back online. We're not integrated well with our GPS system, with our HR system. I mean, it's completely disparate. And the fact that it's not supported and we can't get maintenance upgrades. I mean, it really has. I don't see any other solution. And I think a lot of people are afraid of ERP upgrades and overhauls, and they are enormous. And I've been through many on much larger organizations and smaller, and worked at Oracle. I understand up and down, and from a board perspective and CEO perspective, how to do this. In the end, it comes down to having outstanding internal leadership on your team, not just the consultants, but on your team who get it and who can guide any consultants who you hire about the nuances of our particular solution. So you need to have people on staff who have done an ERP solution, probably bigger than this, that this would be easier for. I am both very supportive of your comments about AMI, and it's critical. I also don't see it possible to start before we get this SAP process moving. There might be some overlap, and I think even in your presentation, there was some overlap, and even in our COSA approved view of when we're going to be spending monies on this, AMI was a little bit later. So it still is lagging. So I guess my question for you is, how much of your statement is that you think we should defer beyond what we have already articulated in our financial planning? Or are you just saying we should just do it a little bit later than our ERP system? Because our ERP system spend, as we've articulated it to the public, and as I understand it, is starting as soon as possible.
Correct.
And our AMI is going to be starting in several years. And I'm just wondering, are you saying that you think we're starting it too soon? Or you're just saying it just needs to be after?
Yeah, I'm saying that the substantive work should be done on the ERP before you're doing.
But is that different than what we've already approved, or you haven't looked at that yet?
Well, I looked at it, but it's the AMI stuff. It didn't look firm to me. It was like, well, we could do this in a year. We could do this. I think doing it according to the schedule in that plan, which really would be starting. So they'd be both doing kind of this planning phase procurement work at the same time. I think even though you might not be spending as much money, the AMI money might be later. I think if you were starting to work on the AMI according to that schedule, I think that's a little too soon.
I think we should get some more focus on the staff on what would change from our current understanding of that spend and the timing.
Yeah. Well, I also just want to mention, we'll get to it later in the ERP options review, but there are benefits to moving to SAP's new product, which would expedite the transition, and those are decisions we need to make. Do we want to spend more time with a new product a new vendor or go with our existing vendor and have it expedited so we can get AMI up and running. So, but
And
we
also
would- yeah.
understanding your AMI specs will be helpful as you build out the ERP system, right?
Yeah.
You can't do them completely separate.
Right. And
and
once
one
you
and then the
know
other.
which
You
vendor you're
gotta have the
going
hooks
with.
in, you gotta have the plugs ready. So, and there will be overlap.
Yes. And as soon as you have that vendor selected, you can get going on the AMI process.
Moving around, Rajiv.
No other comments.
Matt?
First, I'd like to welcome Brad to the organization, and also Andy, thank you for coming out of retirement to help us out on this. This is a big deal. I just want to echo what Jed said, is that this is probably not something that was on the top of the list of wanting to do. It's risen to the top because of the need to do. And usually in government, we don't try to find the shiny thing. We try to, if it's not broke, don't fix it. This thing's broke. So, or is going to break. And so I think at that point, support moving forward as fast as we can on this, especially if it's going to expedite the AMI piece moving forward on that. One of the things in the AMI piece would be when we start looking at more of a detailed approach to that would be the maintenance on that and then the lifespan of those machines. So we have a really good understanding of what we're looking at as we commit to a relatively large capital infrastructure project. So that's it.
I'll just echo on the ERP. I just think this is kind of like, you know, when your roof isn't leaking yet, but it's on the verge of leaking, and the price you'll pay if you let it actually leak and the damage that it ensues. I think the security patches, the idea of us being hacked and the impacts that could have on us, our customers, it's just, these are things that are the threats that are, I think, that are greater than we've ever experienced. And I'm not an IT expert in this, but I think I read and see enough of the challenges that other very established companies run into with security. And I think it's something that's real for us to have to deal with. I do think that being cautious, I appreciate the idea of staggering things. I mean, foremost, we need to have an ERP system that's working for our customers. AMI is really important as well, but I think it is to do the two of them together. I think the word that the fact that you use the word risk so many times began to make me feel anxious about what is our highest priority. And our highest priority is obviously making sure that our system works for our customers and for the district. And so I think getting the cart and the horse in the right order to make sure that we can do these things. I do like the idea of and I wonder if a question is, if we do delay doing AMI, does that, just from a staffing standpoint, I was really compelled by the idea of staff being split in three places. I don't want to do that to our staff. I think our staff are busy enough as it is. So the idea of also trying to manage our resources effectively is another important decision to take into consideration. But I wonder if we do delay AMI, does that allow us to move on ERP any faster? I mean, if it doesn't, that's fine. But if there is another additional benefit by delay, because we can have staff focused on ERP implementation, that would be another reason to consider that.
I mean, I'll respond, but yes, I do believe that if we can dedicate resources to the ERP conversion, then we can get going on it quicker, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I have one more comment that I've been pushing for years. In West Marin, there is a organization that runs their own internet. It's private, in full competition with Comcast, and here the AMI is leaning towards the cell phone connection as opposed to the internet. Miami is going the other way with localized internet. And it seems to me that I just did a rough calc. It's about $400 million a year that Comcast takes out of Marin on internet connection. Not entertainment, just straightforward internet. And it seems to me we're a $100 million a year operation. That's $400 million a year. One of the things that should be at least looked at, and I've pitched this before inside without much success, is to look at setting up our own internet for Marin and piggybacking the AMI onto the internet system. So if you regionally spread it out as opposed to cable, all wireless, it seems to me there's a benefit there that could be really substantial to the people of Marin. We can cut those costs and service our needs at exactly the same time. So just food for thought.
No other comments, or do you have public comment?
Yes, we have several. The first three, Phil Sauter, Roger Roberts, and Larry Minikis.
Thanks for the presentation. About 10 years ago, I had the opportunity to see the SCADA system in operation out at the San Geronimo water treatment plant. And it was a system that showed the level of every tank and the status of every pump. It was really impressive. One of the things we learned about that was that the district sets the tank level at 70%, or at least they did 10 years ago. But by allowing the intelligence to fluctuate the levels of those tanks, we figured out, and the consultants confirmed this, that we could reduce the need for storage by 1 million gallons. So my question is, as we get into AMI and these things, and I'm definitely in support of AMI as a way to educate users and educate ourselves, is the one concern I have, and we can address it before we spend any money, is what will the district do with that data? And I think that should be laid out before the money is spent. Several months ago, there was what President Schmidt called a heat map floating around, and it shows the high water users throughout the county. And it shows that they're pretty geographically collected. And that was a sign to me that there's a real opportunity to be looking at outdoor water use for conservation. So that information, that's a 4-year-old map. And in the meantime, we've had 2 years of dry winters and 2 years of wet winters. What's changed? Wouldn't we like to look at that and analyze that data and see what it's telling us? So I think that perhaps modifying landscapes or converting some potable water use to non-potable water use, we may be able to extend our supply of potable water by another year or so. And that would benefit every one of the district's customers. While I've been hoping to see this target analysis done and updated, I've offered to do the analysis, and all I need is bi-monthly data and some zip codes for the top 500 customers. As always, I'm a firm believer that the numbers will tell us a story and point us in the right direction. So I'd request that while we're getting ready to spend money on AMI expansion, that we justify the expense by being specific about how we'll use the data and if we'll allow the public to contribute to that process. I'll also add that during the conservation workshop, I had a chance to talk with some of my fellow attendees at the workshop. There's some bright and interested folks there. I think the district would benefit from spreading the data around and getting some additional perspective from the customers. If we're really doing 31 gallons per day on indoor water use, I think that's a message that ought to get out. That's data that we're not sharing with our customers, and I think we should all be proud of what they've done and what we've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Roger Roberts and Larry Minikis.
I'll be frank, I'm a babe in the woods when it comes to computer systems. But I do understand the notion of quote unquote systems. And one of the important things that needs to be done in any creation of a new system is to test it frequently and regularly to make sure it's on track. And I haven't heard anything talked about tonight in terms of the testing process that will be applied in this ERP exercise. Thank you.
Thank you. And after Larry Minikis is Wendy Callens.
Yeah, good evening, and I appreciate Andy's presentation here and the risk factor in all of this. And in the big picture, we have a lot more we're looking at here, don't we? I mean, we're looking at really a complete change in the way we transport water, where we're going to get water from, how we're going to move forward. So taking too much risk on in one project could really derail a lot of the other things you're trying to get done. From what Andy's saying from the presentation, 2/3 of these projects either run late, over budget, or have other issues. So I would caution, I think is the word, the board, to move carefully forward. We would like to see AMI, but AMI is secondary to the other projects we're looking at. Really, it's not the priority here. And what you don't want to do is layer that on top because of some pressure felt that we've got to get AMI implemented by 26, 27, or 2028. Take your time. Again, I said this, let's get it right. Thank you.
Thank you. And Miss Wendy Callens, please.
Yes, hello. Thank you. Wendy Callens with Sustainable Marin. I have a different take than my other fellow conservationists who have spoken. I attended the water efficiency workshop, and thank you so much for putting that on. It was very informative, gave us a real opportunity to dialogue, and I made some notes about, next steps of what's needed. And one of the things I put in big letters is we really need to accelerate the AMI. As someone who works in, something similar of trying to get people to change their behavior, data is so important. And having the information of knowing to be able to target your efficiency programs where they are most needed. And that's where AMI is going to give you the information you need. It's really a matter of not just efficiency of water, but efficiency of where you use your resources. My concern is, the ERP could be a real, it could take so long. I mean, I'm spooked by what happened with the county, because that took not just years, but decades, with so much problems that came up with it. And so I'm very worried that if you go with the ERP and you focus only on that and put the AMI aside, you're going to go down the rabbit hole, and it could be years and years before you get a system that actually works. So I would like to see something where there is some commitment to getting AMI going by a certain time, whether or not the ERP is finished or not, because I think that is a very important tool to help with the whole water efficiency workshop, which can save you money, a lot more money in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
All right, thank you. Okay. With that, we'll move on to item number 7, the water supply storage improvements projects. It's another informational item.
You got it? You didn't share it. No, you did? Okay.
Right there with me.
Now it is.
Okay, finally, we can get the show on the road. Heard a lot about risk this evening. I'm feeling anxious. I don't know why. Maybe we can tone it down a little bit. First up, I have a couple of introductions I'd like to do this evening. You know Xavier Arias, who's with Woodard and Curran. He's helping us with program management on the roadmap projects. And to my immediate left, I have Ghislaine Roussel from Terra Engineering and Andrew Dinsick from GeoPentech. Ghislaine has, I think, over 30 years experience in a variety of civil engineering projects, from tunnels to dams, reservoirs, and this sort of stuff that could be kind of useful as we look at local storage. And Andrew, of course, has over 17 years of geotech experience, working on a variety of projects, also
from nuclear power plants to bridges to dams as well. Again, I think Andrew has some specific interest in sort of seismic hazard analysis and things like that. So, but I'll let them say hello to you and introduce themselves a little bit this evening.
Yes, thank you, Paul. I'm Ghislaine Roussel, and I'm with Terra, but I should say that first that you saw probably in the presentation that you got a copy of. TGP is actually a joint venture of Terra Engineers and Geopentech, and we have known Andrew for many years, maybe too many years, and we actually have both spent most of our careers in dealing with water resources projects, and we have worked together on a number of these projects. And I will be the project manager for our team, and Andrew is going to be my partner, the deputy project manager, but he will also have a very significant role in dealing with geotechnical issues as well as leading our design analyses. So that's a little bit of an introduction.
Great.
Yeah, and I think just to add, specialties really kind of fall in the dam safety world. Most of the projects we worked on together have kind of fit into that bucket. And my particular role and expertise is in the seismic hazard evaluation and seismic safety of dams, and that's kind of what makes us unique, at least for this type of project.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so we'll get going. We just have a few slides to share with you this evening, similar to our presentation on the regional conveyance a couple of weeks ago. We want to talk a little bit about process. And again, similar, and you'll hear many of the same themes that you heard just now from Andy on large projects like AMI and ERP related to risk and how we want to move forward very intentionally with these projects, not just in as fast as we can sort of mode. We'll talk a little bit about that before we get into, looking at the work breakdown structure, the sort of scope of work, if you like, that we have proposed this evening. And then we'll close with some next steps. So very briefly, our process to date, then we have, as you know, the board approved the roadmap at the end of February. And since then, we've sort of been resourcing these projects, and we're moving on our early action projects. And you've heard reports on those at board meetings. The long-term projects that we're talking about here, conveyance of supplemental water, and of course, tonight, local storage. We've been bringing along consulting teams, of course, Woodard and Curran, and tonight the board approved Carollo Engineers as to provide the services for the regional conveyance project that we're looking at. And tonight we have TGP, or Terra Geopentech, who've proposed on our local storage. We had, I think, 3 consulting firms propose on this project, AECOM, GEI, and TGP, all excellent proposals. The selection committee was our planning manager, our design engineering manager, myself, Lucy, and a water resources engineer, and all of the team just felt that Terra really did understand what we were looking for. And I think you'll see too in some of the details that we're talking about tonight, even though they're just sort of hypothetical examples of work that need to be done, we've pulled out some of those details tonight to look at. Importantly, the sort of conclusion of this phase of work that we're looking at tonight will help us define a project that is defensible. And that's going to be very important as we move forward. So one of the ways we can try to improve our deadline objectives is to work in parallel. So we're pursuing conveyance and we're pursuing storage, for example. Both projects are being pursued in parallel. And these are important. If at any point in one of those projects, we could encounter some sort of critical point, a new critical fact that gets revealed that would then change the timeline or potentially even the viability of that project. And if we've got parallel projects going, it's relatively straightforward for us to
keep moving forward with the other project. Even within a project, you can imagine there are many plentiful tasks, and some of them are quite large. And in order to accomplish those tasks, it's useful to break them down into subtasks. And some of those subtasks can be pursued in parallel. And you'll see that looking at both of these conveyance or storage projects. If you look at that scope of work, and particularly the schedule, you'll see areas where work's pursuing in parallel. And then importantly, as we move forward on both of these projects, there's some analysis that's going to cross over between both conveyance and storage as we move forward, and that can help us. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Xavier, who's going to talk to us a little bit about sort of the need for this work and how we might go about.
So this is one of my favorite slides here. It builds on what Paul was just saying, but sort of allows you to visualize it. There's a strategic roadmap. So that's parallel efforts, as Paul was just saying. And this is to illustrate how these parallel efforts, they have independent utility, first of all. So you can imagine something that's worth doing, water efficiency, it has its own timeline. It's just going to chug along. But these little circles on the graph, they're kind of just representing, of course, it's phased, and it gives you an opportunity to check in very consciously, see how it's doing, and fine tune it, speed it up, slow it down, scale it up or down. And that's kind of a generic concept that applies to all the projects. And so we started with the simplest one, water efficiency. But there's other aspects to the roadmap. So 2 weeks ago, we were here talking about conveyance. So it has a lot more steps, and you saw some complicated schedules that show that. But for example, we screen the alternatives, we do a detailed analysis of the surviving alternatives, and then we do a pre-design process that informs the CEQA effort, and then it goes through design, construction, et cetera. And as Paul just said, you know, the timeline there is not completely nailed down. At each of these milestones, we might represent, hey, we have significant new facts. It's taking longer. There's a fact we didn't understand at the SWISA point that we need to take into account and factor that in. So conveyance may well have its own complexities, but we're here to talk tonight about yet another one of these threads, which is storage. And the generic steps look pretty similar: screening, detailed analysis, and so on. But I think there's an important point on the prior slide, which is there are some opportunities here for shared analysis. So even though each of these tracks has independent utility, it provides potentially a significant value on its own, they can also interact with each other. We might realize there's synergies. There could also be impacts that have to be disclosed under CEQA because they could be cumulative. So it's important, whether it's good news or bad news, if they interact, we want to capture that, make sure that we document it. So let's see. This is kind of showing that it may happen continuously, but to kind of simplify it, one point where definitely the projects are going to have to be squared up is disclosure of impacts, when sometimes it might be, well, the same areas of the water system. So we're talking about, say, traffic impacts on some road. If both projects touch it, certainly we talk about that. It's a cumulative impact. But on the flip side, we may also see synergies where a certain conveyance alternative works really well with a certain storage alternative. We also want to make sure we capture that. So I think it's important, the parallel track, it's not just a matter of doing it fast, it's also contributing really in a large way to doing it right. So that's why we show this. And it's a generic concept. So we're talking tonight about storage, and we'll get into a little more detail. But there's other aspects to the roadmap, and I think it works well there too. Take something like brackish desal, where in the SWISA, it wasn't very well defined compared to the other alternatives. So that needs further study. So assume that's going to happen. And while that happens, it doesn't have to happen on the critical path because we have plenty of other work to do. So it may well get to a point where those studies are wrapped up and we have a better idea then of how desal may fit into the overall picture. But the ultimate fate of that particular project may well be informed by what happens with the other two, with conveyance and storage. So just an example, we're not locking into that, but the point is these different tracks can inform each other, they can support each other, they can meet our burden of public disclosure about cumulative impacts. So these are all the reasons why I think it has to proceed in parallel to a degree, but it can be thoughtful with things like hold points. So that's what this is all intended to represent. getting into a little more detail on storage, this is a familiar slide, I think, from the conveyance discussion. And the point here really is, it is in a way the same slide. It's at a high level, the projects all have these fundamental steps. And we've checked the box on strategy, and that Swissa outlined a powerful strategy, which took some time and identified a lot of projects that we now have strategic direction to go pursue. But we need to go to the next level. So this yellow box is what we're embarking on for each of the projects in turn. So storage is up at bat tonight, but it's fundamental steps, like thinking about specific projects, enlarging this reservoir or that reservoir, considering them, but in line with the strategy that's already been outlined. What I mean there is we're not reinventing the wheel. We're adding detail to the work that's already been done. And so we'll be kicking off CEQA NEPA. And that's early on because it helps you shape the project. It's not just selling the project or disclosing the project. It actually is, we do it in parallel so that the CEQA process helps us get to a better project. So that's happening as well. And as part of that, we're looking at very project-specific purpose and goals. That's part of your CEQA effort. And we're refining and screening alternatives across the board. This one says conveyance, storage as well. And you'll hear a little bit more about the specific storage alternatives and some of the ways in which the screening criteria are very much project-specific. So it's not, for example, just cost, which could be generic, could be thinking about aspects of a storage project as opposed to a conveyance project. So that's the yellow box. It sets the stage for pre-design of a selected alternative. And that's where it's important that the gold box is done very well, because the green box is pretty expensive. So you want to do it on the project that has survived quite a bit of scrutiny in this yellow box. And that's where for field investigations, particularly for a storage project, they could be substantial. So it's important they be focused on the alternative and on the important questions that need to be answered. And of course, that's what TGP will be focused on. And then that will be the tail end of the CEQA NEPA process, describing what the alternative is, what its impacts are, the alternatives considered, et cetera. And also defining what the needs are as far as permits and right-of-way. And that all sets the stage for a successful final design. There is a kind of a Gantt chart version of this coming right up. This and the color codes match. The point is there's a lot of parallel activity, but there also are certain precedents where you have to do one task correctly before you go to the next one. It's almost generic in that it could apply to many projects, but it turns out it applies pretty well to these projects. Almost every water supply project is going to have these fundamental elements.
Excuse me, Xavier, I think it's on the last slide is the actual dates associated with these, but can you just remind us is what the delivery date is for the final design if all goes well?
You were going to say, Paul?
Oh, so we have I think it's December 2025 for a 30% design is the final. This is really not a specific schedule. These are sort of in the abstract explaining just kind of the steps that we went through on the prior slide, just in a different presentation format.
So we will get more definition on those final dates, I think, as we go forward, that, a specific schedule would be more reliable as we learn more about it.
There is a schedule, though, on the last slide in the presentation does have a schedule. So it doesn't align completely with these activities then, or is, well, it's all right.
Yeah.
We can get to that. Thanks. That's fine.
So I know you heard a lot about risk already today. And this is another risk slide. And all of those steps that I just outlined very briefly are all really part of managing risk. And it's tailored to the complexity and the high profile nature and the potentially impactful nature of the projects that are in front of the district. So if this were a simpler, more straightforward project, we might be having a much more streamlined discussion. Maybe we'd just say, let's just cost out the alternatives, pick the cheapest one and go forward and do it fast. In this case, there's a lot of moving parts to these projects individually. And I also mentioned they may interact. It's important that we make sure we can answer for every one of the stakeholders who will have interest in this. Here's what we did, and here's how we did the analysis, and here's what it showed, and here's why we are moving the way we're moving. Very public, transparent process. I think that's important with a project of this magnitude. So that's what this is about, is managing that risk Because if you get to the end of a process and it seemed like it was going really fast, but you haven't really done it in a thorough fashion, it may turn out, well, there's an alternative that was selected that turns out to have fatal flaws or near fatal flaws, or it doesn't have technical flaws, but it never had buy-in from any of the stakeholders. And I think we need to make sure we're covering all those bases. Very methodical approach is what we're outlining, just given our experience on projects with similar magnitudes. So at this point, I think we're going to get into a little more detail. Yeah, I think I have one more slide. Yeah. The drivers for the work that we're going to talk about tonight related to storage. Again, it's building on what we have, but it's focusing on project specific criteria. That is those that pertain to the storage element, not to the conveyance element. And then within that project, there's different sites that are in play. Really get into site specific detail. We need to do that in order to come up with meaningful costs, identify important thresholds, like how much do you raise the dam? There could be important thresholds, for example, for inundation. And we need to be able to describe impacts and benefits and quantify that, not just say generally, oh, traffic might be impacted. No, we're going to try to quantify important impacts. And that all supports a good CEQA NEPA process. So now I think we're going to hear from Tara about how they're going to do all that.
With your permission, I'd like to just say a few things about our team in the context of our project organization. This is the project organization that we have, and it's really divided into, whoops, this doesn't no longer build.
You can just hit escape. There you go. No.
I shouldn't touch anything. Maybe I shouldn't touch anything. Okay, there basically are two parts to this organization chart. The one on the left is the evaluation of the alternatives, and the one on the right is when we move into the design phase with the 30% so-called preliminary design of the selected alternatives. And what we have done here is we have assembled key individuals to lead and do the work on the technical areas that we think are essential into developing what has been identified as ultimately a well-defined and defensible project that comes to you for your approval. And these individuals have, great majority of them, over 20 years of experience in the various areas. But the thing that's even more important than that, they have all relevant experience, but they are personally committed to this assignment and to seeing this project to, successful completion. And I think that's very important to me. Another thing that I would like to point out is we have a senior review team. Oh, now it's building. Don't mess with my slides, please.
Sorry.
And the senior technical review team that we have there on the left of the slide is really a critical part of our quality process. And those are really technical experts in the critical aspects of the projects. And they will be meeting at times during the performance of the work. They will also be consulted individually so that they can review the direction and the work of our team and make sure that we really deliver this defensible project for you. I have managed multidisciplinary teams for many years. And one of the things that's very important to me and to this team is that we are a completely integrated team, and we are focused on one goal, and that's a successful project. So my experiences that I've seen is that the key to really delivering a successful project is, I know, it's my fault. My fault. No, I can't do anything.
Stick the space bar. It's safer.
There. Okay, sorry about that. So the integrated project management is really the key to a successful project delivery. And I can't do it. This mouse doesn't work. You told me to go to the right, and then I was. Anyway, never mind. This is it's really a pretty straightforward process, but it's important to follow it. And the first step is to define the objectives and the scope. And that means identifying the technical issues and everything. But what's important to me is in that step, you identify the project risk. And we've talked about that a lot, but it's important to identify these risks and to have some mitigation measures ready. And then we move on to the plan. And the plan is really anchored on a detailed work breakdown structure. And I will touch on that in a minute. And that identifies the level of effort and the detailed schedule. And we develop this plan with our technical lead, and then we document it and then communicate it to the team so that everybody buys into it. And that's what we're going to do. And then we move into the monitoring and controlling the project. That includes weekly updates, schedule updates, internal schedule updates with our team, and cost updates. And what that does is that it allows us to take timely corrective action, if necessary, so that then that happens before the cost, the budget, the schedule can be impacted. And then we do have monthly checks with the district. And this left, you say? Okay, this really works. And what the key is to develop a sound plan, have the discipline to follow it, but also the wisdom to adjust it, because we know things will change. That's a fact of life. So we are well into this planning process already at the proposal level, because we developed a detailed work breakdown structure as we reviewed all the documents that were provided in the RFP. And this work breakdown structure really has 4 major tasks, including project management. But the technical tasks include developing the background data and the project requirements, establishing the criteria for selection, and not in a vacuum, but with the other criteria that have been established for some of the project, in particular, the conveyance, and then evaluating the storage improvement alternatives. And then the final task is the preliminary design. But the work breakdown structure we have established, that's shown here, you cannot read, but it goes down to the 3rd level of subtask. And under that, we even have detailed activities. And the reason we did that is because that informed our schedule, but it also allowed us to assign staff to these activities. So we could develop and prepare a realistic bottom-up cost estimate for the work. So what we're going to do is we're going to consider a wide range of potential solutions, but quickly narrow them down to 4. And those will be thoroughly vetted. And then we will clearly document the rationale that's behind the alternative selection, so that we can really have a defensible, well-defined project to bring to you for approval before we move to the design. Now, the strategic water supply assessment has identified 3 categories of surface water improvement projects: enlarging existing reservoirs, building new reservoirs, or modifying the spillways of existing dams by adding movable gates. And they had 12 selection criteria, and they ranked all these solutions that they considered at the strategic level from a ranking of 1, which is the most favorable, to a ranking of 5, which is the least favorable. But it's remarkable why at the strategic level, within each of the categories, the ranking was really uniform. And in the final analysis, the enlarging of the reservoirs was the preferred category. However, it still had a lot of not very favorable, even not favorable at all, criteria. But the problem is that at the strategic level, the lack of granularity among the 3 candidate reservoirs make it very difficult, if not impossible, to choose. So this is, basically what Paul and Xavier had mentioned before. We need to really refine this evaluation. And what that will require is that we do some detailed evaluation of the following issues that are site-specific site-specific geotechnical consideration. Geologic hazards are also very important. They need to be considered and differentiated between the sites because they are different. Right-of-way issues, ownership of the land that potentially would be inundated, by raising the dams. And then, of course, conflicts with utility and roadways. There's also environmental impacts to consider, both biological, but also on cultural resources, community impacts, public acceptance, of course, and last but not least, cost. And when it comes to cost at this level and to be able to differentiate these projects cannot just be quantities and unit prices. And one of the things that is critical is to look at the site-specific logistics of the construction and the constraints, because that could have a tremendous impact on the cost. And that's what we're going to do. Now, one of the things I'd like to do is have Andrew discuss some of the technical aspects of the analysis that we propose to do. But that would be, he would do that in the context of a specific site. But I want to make sure we all remember that this is just an example. The idea here is to demonstrate and illustrate the complexity of some of these impacts and the need to really include special features, special measures, so that we do address these impacts and reduce them or even eliminate them if possible.
Sorry, if I could just interrupt for 1 minute. This is, it's very interesting. You outlined where we had arrived to some degree with the strategic water supply assessment with an emphasis on existing dam enlargement. But what I'm hearing you saying is that in order to ensure that that is the most evidence-based decision, let's say, you're still going to be conducting analysis of the alternative options, such as new dam construction and spillway raising. So
that is correct.
Although we took steps towards landing upon existing dam enlargement, some of this analysis may ask us to reconsider that, which I'm not against by any means. I just want to understand that.
That it's possible.
Right.
And it's also possible, probably likely, that there would be a combination of some surface storage improvement with conveyance. I mean, that's, the idea of bringing water from Sonoma is fine, but you need a place to store it. And, so I think we need to just work together, among the program. And I think that I've addressed that with the places where we have to connect those different types of projects to see if,
Right. And if I could add a little detail, the range of study for the TGP team is what Paul and I, after some discussion, said, hey, this ought to be their scope. So things like the adjustable gates. And the reason is we are in fact building off of the strategic water supply assessment, which said it did look at obviously different benefits, different amounts of storage you get. You get a lot more storage if you raise the dam than if you add a gate. And I think that'll come out very quickly. But one of the things I mentioned and maybe jumped over, there's a purpose and need that we need to really hone in on for each project. So if literally just adding a gate to a reservoir, if that actually checked the box on fulfilling your project purpose and need, we'd be done. It'd be fast, it'd be inexpensive. Our take on it, and I think other studiers, they've looked at it, it's not likely. On the other hand, it's identified, it's feasible, so it deserves to be looked at just to make sure that we don't dismiss it out of hand. And it may well be that it supplements something else that's worth doing. So it does get studied, and we made that call that it's worth the Terra team taking a look at it to make sure we don't miss something.
Yeah, it makes sense to me, Xavier. I just think, it's important for our messaging and engagement with stakeholders too, because, they are constantly asking what direction we're taking, what decisions are we making. We tell them, okay, well, we've really decided now on dam enlargement. So as we're going through this process, ensuring that we're communicating this process to our stakeholders in a productive way so that doesn't look like indecision, but just more informed decision is the result. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, so I think Andrew is going to take us through sort of an example, some of the complex analysis that we'll be looking at.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, just to add to your point, I think, you know, the idea is that at the end of the day, there may be some synergy, some combination of solutions that actually ends up being what we would say is the preferred alternative. I think also having a document in hand that says, here's the decision we made and here's why, and it's, you know, it's quantifiable. It's, you can point to it. Anyone, it will withstand scrutiny as you carry on forward is also quite important. And what you have now, you know, the strategic assessment is, you know, perfectly defensible. You know, read the document, and I thought, you know, really well done piece of work. But the key, at least from our standpoint, as we zoom in on storage improvement, is differentiating between the projects, which at the scope that they covered, you really couldn't do. And I think you probably have some of that sentiment as well. And I think, you know, we want to try to now take the options and, you know, at a first glance in a relatively short time frame, zero in on what we think are the four most, you know, are viable, you know, where we're going to actually be able to collect data that will be useful to you in the short term and in the long term for operating these reservoirs, and you know, eliminate options that have fatal flaws, clearly document why we've eliminated those so that you have that, you know, record to point back to as somebody says, well, you know what, I think this would have been good. And you can say, well, no, here's our clear documentation as to why that was eliminated. And I think, as we look at the different categories, as you mentioned, we do agree at face value with the information we have now. The existing dam enlargement seems, you know, like a clear preferential path. But we think at least exploring the new dam construction and being able to at least put a you know, a little bit more quantification into, this is the cost per acre foot you're talking about. These are the risks that those projects run, and this is why we're eliminating those is a pretty important step if we do end up eliminating them. Similarly with the spillway reconfiguration, it's important to, I think, look at some combination of what the spillway reconfiguration will be anyway, because any of the dam raises, you're going to be doing more to the facility than just you know, raising the crest of the dam. So I think, you know, we understand that that's phase one here, or really the first step of phase one is to look at the details of these alternatives in a little bit more care and come up with a quantifiable matrix that says, here's the four that we think we need to collect some more data on and look at it in more detail. And then from those four, have a defensible reason why we, you know, this is the one that we think is worth recommending going forward. And we want to talk a little bit about, you know, I mentioned most of my background comes from the dam safety side of things.
Andrew, sorry,
Sure.
bit of a random question.
Yeah, go
We
for it.
hear a lot about reservoirs that are used for flood control as well as supply. Do we have any option for considering that with our reservoirs or with this type of analysis? Is there any value to be gained by trying to add flood control to our water supply system? Maybe that's not something we can answer today, but just.
Yeah, we really would only have one reservoir that actually drains to a creek that is subject to flooding, and that's Phoenix. The others, of course, drain to Lagunitas and Walker Creek, and I'm not aware that they experience flooding on those, at least in the, you know, the severe events that we've seen.
I would.
But that was easy, Paul.
I mean, I think that there's from a communications and a, you know, just a public outreach type of aspect to all dam raises, you are gaining a better ability to manage storm, you know, the unexpected nature of, you know, of extreme storm events. And so I think, you know, at a minimum, taking credit for that is important. Whether or not it's the primary purpose of what you're doing is a different question, obviously, but you know, I think, you know, in reality, and we'll get to actually one of these examples that we looked at in a little bit of detail for the proposal stage, which, you know, potentially shows some promise and talk about some of the challenges. But yeah, these are all unique, you know, these are all reservoirs that have unique characteristics. They're all zoned earth fill dams. Zoned just means that, as you guys probably know this, but you have various zones of fill. Some are acting as, clay core to prevent seepage, to prevent loss of stored water. And then you have your shell materials, which gives you the more robust shear strength and better performance, both statically and seismically. And then, specific drains within the dam to capture any seepage water and collect it and prevent certain portions from becoming saturated and losing shear strength. So this is modern earth fill construction, and realistically, at just a feasibility standpoint, there's no dam safety reason not to pursue a dam raise on these three. This is a unique and kind of cool project because the challenges are a little bit outside of the norm. Usually we're most concerned about, how are we going to solve this from a dam safety standpoint? But these look like all, completely realistic and reasonable projects in terms of an engineering question. It's much more about the kind of the other factors that go into making these decisions, and in particular the other factors that go into coming up with an expected cost for these projects, which is really where it gets complicated for these three. But yeah, the three reservoirs range in capacity from 10,000 to 32,000 acre feet as currently operated at maximum pool. And it's noted that if you were to select one project to try to gain your additional 20,000 acre feet goal of surface water storage, looking at this plot from the strategic planning document, there's one option that stands out like a sore thumb. And this is basically a plot that shows the cumulative frequency of inflows to these three reservoirs relative to their capacity. And the Nicasio in green, you can see is overtopping, it's basically you're exceeding the storage capacity of that reservoir 60% of the time. So there's pretty clearly, some surface water that's not being captured at that location, which made it pretty, a pretty interesting one to say, okay, well, let's dig into this one, because if they didn't just select this off the bat at the strategy stage, then there must be something interesting here. And so digging into this one was fascinating. It's pretty clear that, you have immediate impacts to the surrounding area because it's such low-lying topography here. You get an additional 10,000 acre feet, raising the dam by 12 feet in crest height. Max pool raised 19 feet gives you 20,000, and then a 26 foot dam raise would give you about 30,000 acre feet. And what's pretty obvious beyond just the impacts to how much land is being inundated here and the potential, issues associated with acquisition, the potential issues associated with impacts to the roadways, which are clearly apparent. It's noteworthy in the back of the reservoir that there are, at face value, there's, clearly some interest in trying to protect the existing developments in the town of Nicasio. And we'll zoom in to the backside of the reservoir there, and effectively there's a number of, historic features and structures that would all be inundated if you don't do something to prevent the reservoir from encroaching in that area. And that's a solvable problem. You can effectively construct a dike in the northern canyon here, which would keep the retained reservoir away from some of those existing structures. It would potentially include diverting the creek in order to capture the potential 20,000 acre feet that's coming in regularly. But this is something that would in our planning phase, we would look at specifically, okay, to make this a feasible project, this and this and this would be required at a minimum. And so for this Nicasio example, for instance, this would be a pretty clear example of, okay, there's more than just fill required to build the dam. We would need to explore some sort of dike alternative as well. coming up with again, beyond just the qualities, the quantities and the cost per unit on constructing this embankment, we're interested in, well, where would we get that fill? Where could we source it from in a way that maybe adds additional storage by, finding some borrow source within the existing footprint of Nicasio, land that you are already, that is already owned by the district is an obvious choice. Some combinations of forebays or after bays associated with Nicasio, so that you're specifically inundating land that's either easier to acquire or already owned, is another pretty obvious example of sort of the optimization that would go on during the first phase of work here. We would again look at only collecting enough data to make some conclusions about, this is where we would get the fill. These are the properties that we would get if it's placed and compacted. And this is the performance we would expect in terms of, being comfortable that we would have adequate dam safety when it's all said and done.
Is that what they did when they built it?
They did a pretty careful job of sourcing and specifying how to place and compact the fill. There was a pretty significant shift in the 40s and 50s in terms of dam construction and, just kind of thoughtfully selecting and zoning compacted fill. And so the existing dam it has performed adequately through the years, and considering the proximity to the San Andreas Fault, it's good that they did that.
I was talking more about the cut and fill.
Yes. So from what I could tell you, there were some optimizations they definitely could have kind of more carefully considered. I don't think I've ever actually seen a reservoir that has an island in the middle, because usually that's, plan A is, we'll take it out and that'll be, additional storage. This is also kind of a unique reservoir in terms of just the average depth of the reservoir is really, really shallow, but that's just more of a feature of the topography. And so I get, again, why the idea of dredging and additional storage capacity via dredging is a solid option. If you found some sort of partner in exploring, hey, these people really need fill and we really need to get it out of here, then, you could definitely come up with a pretty elegant solution to increase storage without actually changing anything that's not already inundated, which would be obviously the best possible outcome here. But either way, there's a number of geotechnical considerations for all of these alternatives that would need to be more carefully fleshed out so that we could come up with a realistic cost, come up with an idea of the environmental impacts, the community impacts, and what that list ultimately looks like. And then that would inform a decision on which of these alternatives we think would realistically be the most preferable to pursue. We didn't mention some of the other considerations, but again, besides seismicity, slope stability is something we would need to look at for each of the final four alternatives: earthquake-induced deformations, sedimentation, mercury mobilization. These are all factors that could either be specifically, hey, this is a fatal flaw. Let's put this one, let's put this particular alternative at the end of the list, or open up some opportunity to help improve efficiency if there's actually hey, if we take this area for borrow as an example, it's the clayiest material. It happens to be quite ideal for clay core, and it also kind of takes out some of the potential for landslide hazard or something along those lines, and that would be a positive. So those are the general thoughts that would go into some of the decision making about refining the concepts and then selecting a given alternative. We've used the word differentiation a lot, and I think that's really kind of the entire point of what we've scoped out in phase one here. We want to have we want to have a defensible recommendation for this is the right way to proceed going forward. We want to interact to the degree that everybody feels comfortable that the decision made is the right one. We want to interact with the district, specifically the engineering teams, and get their thoughts and make sure that the stuff that they want explored and considered is incorporated in our decision making matrix, and then refine the costs, come up with what we think is a defensible cost per acre foot, and then in addition to the impacts, use that as a kind of quantified way to make a final recommendation for then proceeding on a 30% design. As I've mentioned, the big kind of direct cost for the 30% design is really the data collection effort that supports the drawings and specs at that stage. And so we only want to do that once, and we want to do it. We want to make sure that whatever selection is, as we go forward with for a 30% design level is not wasted effort because there's some fatal flaw we've missed or some, potential, negative impact that would threaten the project all down the road. So that's basically our vision on this.
I have a quick comment. Thank you, Andrew. That was very informative. I will be pushing very hard on how we got where we are going down the road. I have a lot of respect for previous engineering. In other words, they don't just arrive at the height of dams or the brim of a spillway by rubbing their tummy. And to the extent you can, I'll be looking for you guys to dwell on that issue of why the reservoir is the shape, the height of the dam, etc., which could all be MMWD cost. It could just say, we're not going to spend any more than X on the dam. Very well could be the case. I don't know the answer. If I did, I would just tell you. But be sure that you include that, at least a paragraph explaining how we got to each of them, because they've all been raised. So engineers have set through this exact evaluation previously, and they arrived at a certain conclusion, which is the current height of the dams. Why?
I'm sure that there is a correct answer for all three of these existing reservoirs. I know the fascinating history of Nicasio and the fact that the relocation of the roads cost more than the dam construction itself. And
Sure.
I mean, realistically, that's the problem you're looking at with any of the dam raises, is that the externality and the external costs are probably going to trump anything that's related to is this a viable engineering solution, which is an unusual position to be in. That's usually not the problem we find ourselves in. It's mostly, how do we solve this from an engineering standpoint? Is this doable? And this is much more of a, what are the external costs and how do you quantify those in a way that you feel like this is, an achievable project, and this is the cost per acre foot you're talking about.
We'll take a look and make sure we can learn from history.
Let's hope so.
Right? That'd be the advantage I think you're getting at, Director Russell.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, as I said, folks have sat at this table, exactly the same table, 30 years ago, and made that decision based on some engineering criterion, which I don't know what they are, but they are not tummy rubbing, except with one, which even the one you mentioned is basically, I can see MMWD making that decision. The infrastructure costs were too high to continue. And you also need to keep in mind, in Nicasio and Suluhuli, they were done under a tremendous amount of pressure to fix this problem now, fix the storage issue now with the drought. So there was push for that exact issue to be solved quickly. So especially with Suluhuli, which I don't know if you've been there or not, but you feel like you're driving to Oregon when you go there. I was shocked the first time how
You have
long
more?
it took me to drive
I have
there.
like 2 more slides and Ben asked me to get out of here by 9 and he's jet lagged. I don't know. Storage capacity. So, right, this is one of our key prioritized projects, and we're moving forward as directed as quickly as we can, though very intentionally. And we do want to make sure that our analysis is defensible and that we don't miss anything along the way. It's when we arrive at that point where we want to choose the project to move forward with 30% design, we need to be sure. The team you've met, just a fraction of, as you saw from the project sheet earlier in the presentation, is very well qualified. They have the technical ability and the experience to successfully deliver this project. tonight's just an information item. Our goal was just to have exactly what we did, a nice conversation with you and a discussion. And of course, any questions, staff will be back probably at the next board meeting with an item for your consideration on this. And
Okay.
that's it.
That, thank you. I'm just mindful that I think there are going to probably be a lot of comments on this. And I'm wondering, Ben, whether as the night is getting kind of late, whether we might move the last item to a subsequent meeting, just as okay. I know that folks have maybe been waiting to present, but I don't want to short shrift this because this is obviously really important, and also just recognizing we've been going for a while. Okay. Larry, you already started off. Do you want to keep going around the circle here?
One more
Okay.
question. Zav, yeah, please don't refer to the public as a burden. That was the word you chose, was our burden of,
Disclosure.
okay, whatever. Just, it's not a burden, it's a pleasure. And it's something we absolutely need.
Great. Well, I want to thank you for coming today and presenting. What I loved about your presentation is that it seems like you were clearly focused on making a decision and decision making. And there's been a lot of pushback. We heard it in our Marin IJ, editorial. And as the three of us were running in our campaign about Marin Water hiring another set of consultants, why aren't you guys taking action and doing? In my meeting at the Rotary Club this morning, I also had three people ask me that same question, right? It's out there for us. So what I loved and what I said to them is that this is the beginning of these projects. We are starting them now. And what I'm hoping and expecting is that we're going to come out of your work with very clear, actionable items to move forward with, and not just a list that's within 30 or 40% of cost or feasibility or whatever, right? So we have our list. We have a short, medium, and long-term idea of where it could go, but we're really now leaning on you guys to say, here it is, go for it. It should be fairly clear and scientific. And as you go through your decision tree, and I think it'd be good for us to understand what that decision tree analysis is, what are the points in which you say this option's out? And in order to figure out where we follow our decision making in that decision tree, you have to have really clear goals starting up, right? You have to have really clear goals of environmental impact, CEQA, potential EIR reports, timing to get them done, cost to get them done, and a very clear set of goals around how much water we're looking for. So as you define our goals, and I think all of those are the ones that are top of mind for me, then we can come out of this proud that we're making a move, and we're going to help support our community that is asking for a drought tolerant, thoughtful response to the impact of climate change. And so I'd love to see that decision tree. Let's go as fast as we can, as thoughtful as we can. Let's not make mistakes, but we really are we're on a path to move, and we're with you as much as you need to.
Anjeev?
Yeah, I think this. All right, sorry, this sense of urgency is acute. And so Paul, I just really want to commend you on taking the roadmap and moving on the big items so quickly. Conveyance was options for studying conveyance were presented 2 weeks ago, and now storage. It's really encouraging because, over the holidays, I read our Water Resources Plan 2040, which you'll remember well, Paul. It was published in 2017. And it's strikingly similar to our strategic water supply assessment that came out just recently. And as far as I can tell, none of the recommendations in here were actually implemented. And, I think the option for not doing anything no longer works, given the increasing uncertainty that we're facing with climate change and our water supply. So to see this moving forward is really encouraging. I noticed in the work plan that there is one board presentation scheduled towards the end. And maybe to Jed's comments, if you could consider an intermediary presentation that allows us to track your, just understand how you're making decisions before we get to that big, the big overarching conclusion, I think that would be really helpful.
To be clear, there will be routine briefings and updates as this moves forward, certainly on the big decisions to get board feedback and input, but also just on progress. So that'll be a constant as we move forward.
Great. And then one other point, this came up following the discussion on studying conveyance. The carbon footprints of what we're considering are not, as far as I can see, considered in the RFP or in the work plan. I suspect by the time we're getting ready to move forward with design and construction, probably the single largest lens we're going to be looking at these things through is going to be the carbon footprint. There's cost. You mentioned other externalities, Andrew, but the carbon footprint is going to be one. Given how far we are in this process, I don't know if there's an option to include that, those types of analyses regarding carbon footprints of different storage options, and similar for conveyance. I hope we still have that opportunity.
Oh, I think maybe I could address that by just mentioning ESA is already under contract to provide comprehensive environmental services for storage as well as conveyance. So that's one of those examples of a shared analysis. So GHG analysis and part of that is carbon footprint and energy usage, other things that are considered concerns, whether or not related to climate change, those are all being systematically addressed. So when we scoped what Terra needs to do, and we do have an environmental aspect, they have an environmental sub, but it's more to coordinate to make sure we're getting the right information from them, giving them the right environmental criteria and information. So we want it to all be consistent. And so that's why there is a separate team doing environment for all of these projects. But there is a coordination aspect. So, and I think your larger point is carbon footprint, definitely. It's one of those environmental impacts that gets analyzed.
But Xavier, to the degree that it feeds into the decision tree, are we just going to get like a high level understanding that yes, that's going to have a carbon cost of X, but
I think to the extent that it helps us differentiate, and that's why I mentioned we're starting CEQA now. We're not going to do all the technical work and then try to sell it under CEQA. Now, CEQA starts now so that it can inform not just the selection, but even the shaping of the alternatives. So I think it is supposed to be an interactive process. So when Terra is looking at a specific alternative and, well, we can do this or that, one of those concerns will be things like minimizing all of the impacts, including carbon footprint.
So maybe just last point on that, maybe it would be good to let's hear from ESA at some point on how they'll be doing that analysis, how granular it's going to get, whether or not the degree to which it might affect decisions.
Yes, thanks.
Matt?
Yep. Paul, it's exciting to see the team continue to grow here as we move forward, especially this quickly, and having you run these projects in parallel is impressive. So appreciate the movement on this. It's exciting to look at the timeline here and look to do preferred selection workshops in less than a year. I mean, that's a big deal in terms of the speed of government. So I appreciate the speed from which we're moving. Two things. One, when we look at Suluhuli and Nicasio, if there's going to be an impact to the surrounding private landowners, which I'm assuming there is, the more transparent that we can get out in front of that and quell rumors or make sure they're hearing messages straight from the horse's mouth, I think it would be better for just the entire success of those projects. So for those to appreciate that. And then to follow up on Jed and Ranjiv, I think it's important to differentiate the study part of this really is over. And that was the water supply assessment, and it's in the name itself. This is phase one of the project. And even though it's going to dive back into some studying, it's really to make sure that we have a defensible project. So we're not hiring another consultant to study. We're hiring a consultant to start the project and move it forward. And I think it's important to continue that message. So thank you very much. I'm excited for the team.
One quick thing on that, there is a map that the folks that or live in and around Suluhuli are passing around with their own analysis that I think is breeding maybe some distrust because they're super nervous, right? So the sooner we get on what's feasible and what's not will help build trust, and let's include them in our thought process earlier than better. And I think you're already doing that, Paul. So thank you.
Yeah, a number of things. Thank you. I mean, I think we've already broadly conveyed how important it is that we're making real progress on this, and how and the timeline for moving forward is encouraging. And a couple of questions I've got about the running these things in parallel sounds like we're getting a lot done, but I also wonder to what extent we are the cart and the horse are getting sideways with each other. And one of the questions I have is, how do you address how these storage options play out based on different conveyance scenarios? So are you assuming that there's no new additional water being brought into these reservoirs, or is there an assumption that new conveyance will bring in additional supplies and be above and beyond what we currently have from surface water runoff or whatever be the source of the current reservoir? So how is that being addressed?
I'll start, and Xavier and others can jump in. But so both the conveyance and the storage project have independent utility. In other words, without increasing storage, the conveyance project can still help us, because in the drought, our reservoirs will be low. And so there'll be room available in a reservoir to store water from the Russian River, for example. Where, of course, you're at a slightly higher risk that the following year might be wet and you spill. So you can see maybe now a nexus with storage, an increase in storage might make it less likely for you to spill, just based on past hydrology. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that. So.
Sure. So I think that Paul pointed out we can analyze the projects separately. What's the benefit of storage? What's the benefit of conveyance for individual alternatives and variations of those alternatives? We also will be modeling quantitatively how they work together. Mm-hmm. So we'll be able to say, well, if we have this pipeline and this particular reservoir expansion, and we run that over a period of 80 years, what does that look like on average? How much benefit is that giving us for drought protection compared to, say, one of them a la carte?
Thank you. I think, to the points that have been made by Jed and Matt about the alternatives and the screening criteria, these are things that are really extremely important, that were long discussion items as part of the SWISA effort. And I think what criteria that are selected and are used to drive alternatives analysis and ultimately selecting a preferred alternative, those are things that are really, I think, very important to come back to the board with. And to the public to be able to understand how we're doing that. So I really encourage that to be part of what we talk about early, because I think that reflects not only the goals of the board and staff, but also I think to the extent that we hear about it from our constituents, what they would like to see us consider in what moves forward. I think that's all the comments I've got for tonight. Are there any other board comments? If not, public comment?
Yes, we have a few. Mr. Roger Roberts, Larry Minikis, and Phil Sauter, please.
Thank you. There's a bigger question, which is regional in nature and very political in nature. Is this conveyance and storage going to be two-way, so that there's some benefit for Sonoma Water to dive into this project and help us make it happen? And somehow we need to consider that as part of the exercise. And I'm not quite sure who's going to be responsible for it, but if it's going to be a two-way conveyance with shared storage, that's a whole different kettle of fish. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good, Roger. And thank you for the presentation. And in contrast to the last presentation where we're talking about a phased approach, Here we're talking working integrated in parallel, and it makes a lot of sense. And what I just want to speak to is the process has been ongoing. I mentioned this to Jed in a note, is that what's really impressive is the clarity with which this is being presented to the public, so the public can follow along and see how this is unfolding step by step by step. And for that, I just want to give thanks for the work that you guys are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. After Mr. Phil Sauter is Carol D.
Thank you. That was another really interesting presentation. I really appreciate it. Every time I come into this building, I am in awe that this district has been operating the way it has for well over a century. And the business has been, for all of that time, providing high quality drinking water district-wide. 98% of every drop of water that we use in this district is high quality potable water. Reservoir expansion has always appealed to me because it's another high quality water supply from within our own pristine watershed. But it has its downsides, cost being one of them. Loss of property is another one. A serious discussion with the State Water Board on environmental releases would be another possible downside. I really worry about standing up here and becoming a nuisance because I keep asking for an analysis of how we're actually using our water and maybe taking a relook how much of our business is potable versus non-potable, and whether it's time to really take a deeper dive into how customers are using the product that we're selling, as well as where it's being used. There may be other solutions besides building a high quality potable reservoir in West Marin. There may be ways to store non-potable water or in different distribution systems that would cause us to maybe relook at our model. I don't think it would take long to do that analysis and to take a look at how customers are using water today, and if it's time maybe to take a step back and look at our business model. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Carol D, please.
Yes, I've spoken at previous meetings. I'm a member of a community out there in very remote West Marin. We are property owners on land that touches on the Sulihula Reservoir. And it's very difficult to hear these discussions that talk about possibly inundating properties that would maybe destroy roads, access, homes, just years of agricultural history in West Marin. So I just want to put that out there for this new team that's been brought on. We have recently been contacted by General Manager and by Paul Cellier, who are starting to have ongoing discussions with us to make sure that there's transparency and that we have an active dialogue with you as you go through your decision-making process. I'm very heartened to hear some of the directors actually mention those of us who are on the edges of the Sulihula and how much we stand to lose should that dam get raised a certain height. So I appreciate that. And I would simply just urge the consulting team to carefully consider the tremendous loss that would occur if certain inundation areas were to take place around Sulihula and the Nicasio, for that matter. Thanks for the time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And we have Mr. Clayton Smith.
Makes me ill.
Oh, yes, it makes you ill. Okay, I think it's kind of interesting to follow up on the previous caller. The only people I've seen that have routinely showed up to critique and stay in touch with this process outside of the people who are into the hair shirt culture of endless amounts of privation and limitation on the amount of our water have been the people out there by Sulahuli. The rest of the county, I would say 99% of your customers are completely unaware of any of these things that you're doing, notwithstanding the mailings that come with the bills. The other thing about the fellow talking about the high quality potable water, I've decided to use Berkey water filters. And in particular, one of the reasons I'm spending money on a Berkey water filter is because it does provide a filter of fluoride, a totally unnecessary addition to the water supply that we have, one that is actually an industrial toxin. I believe it's a byproduct of aluminum production. And I've wondered in environmental and health conscious Marin, with all the focus on eating properly and whatnot, how the water board continues the process of adding that unnecessary ingredient to the water, when in fact we would have a higher quality water without it. And also people, if they needed or had a need for fluoride, they can get it in every toothpaste that's out there if you choose a toothpaste with this has fluoride in it. So I'd suggest thinking about that too. And I also am wondering why we should certainly look at the cost benefit of obsessing about carbon footprint. This climate change phobia has really gone on a little bit too long. It's very long in the tooth, and people are really giving up on it too. Like I think people are beginning to kind of resent the general paradigm of the hair shirt culture we have allowed ourselves to kind of submerge into. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, thank you, Terry. I just want to say on the going back to the previous comment about the impact of the inundated areas that are potentially being considered, and I personally don't feel like I understand them well enough. And at some point in the not distant future, I'd like to maybe see if we couldn't do a tour out there to look at some of the potentially inundated areas. It's one thing to look at them on aerial photographs and see graphics that help us see how land does inundate at different elevations. It's another thing, I think, to see it on the ground. So I'm gonna look for some interest in seeing if maybe the board want to do a tour. So, okay, any other comments? All right, that moves us. Thank you all very, very much for staying for a late evening. Appreciate it. That brings us to, we're going to skip over then, is that we've done this. Okay, so we're going to skip over the district paving cost update, which was item number 8, and we're going to move to the future meeting schedule.
Okay, just quickly, next Friday, September 15th is the operations committee. Then the following week is our second regular bi-monthly meeting. And also that same week, we'll have the watershed committee on September 21st at 1:30. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, we are adjourned. Have a good evening, folks.